Hey, fixed income guys. So what I want to do today is to talk about credit default swaps. We started to discuss it a little bit in class, but now I'm going to introduce a quick and dirty way to look at it, right? So first of all, what are credit default swaps? Okay. Or CDS. Okay, so that's actually pretty simple, okay? You have a buyer of a CDS, a buyer, and you have a seller of a CDS. Okay? So a buyer buys a CDS and he will pay a certain amount of money to the seller. So say he pays, let's say, 5%, and then he have a notional on which he is going to pay, like as a principal, let's say it's going to be 10 million. So every year he pays 5% of 10 million, right? So every year he pays $500,000. Okay, on a quarterly basis, so 500,000 divided by 4, that's what he pays, let's say, every 3 months. Okay, so that's what the buyer pays the seller, right? What does the seller owe the buyer? Well, that's a big question, right? So the seller owes the buyer as follows. If the company defaults, right, what the seller is going to give the buyer is going to give him a portion of the notional. The portion that he is going to give him depends on something called a recovery rate. So for example, if the recovery rate is going to be 40%, 0.4, right, the seller is going to give a buyer $6 million. How do I calculate this $6 million? Well, 1 minus 0.4 is 0.6. Times 10 million, which is the original notional, it would be actually, right, $6 million. Okay. So that's basically the contract. The contract is pretty straightforward, right? I'm a buyer, I'm giving money to the seller, and then the seller gives money back to the buyer if something happens to the company. So we can think about this contract as being as insurance against default. Okay? Insurance against default. Okay, so that's all great, but how do we make money, right? How does these contracts are actually traded on the market, so how do we make money on them, okay? So here's the secret, the biggest secret of them all, okay? You never hold those contracts till maturity. You never, if you're a buyer, right, and you're going to pay $500,000, you will never hold them till maturity. Say tomorrow, right, the company on which you buy the contract, right? So we have a company, let's say it's a company in IBM, right? So we buy a contract on IBM. So if IBM defaults, right, you're going to get $6 million, but you as a buyer, right, pays until IBM defaults, right, 5%, right, you pay $500,000 a year, right? So if you have this setup, how you are making money on this contract? How does a buyer makes money on this contract, right? So here's the trick. Tomorrow, IBM riskiness goes up. So what will happen? This amount, right, which is 5%, is going, let's say, to become 6%. Okay? So you have 6% now, okay, to insure against default. So basically, if you are a seller of the contract, okay, tomorrow, after the riskiness of the company went up, what do? You say, okay, I'm ready to go into the contract because now the riskiness of IBM is actually higher. It's not 5%, 6%. I'm going to sell the contract for somebody who is going to make me $600,000. Now, how does a buyer is going to make money of this, right? So you have a buyer here, which with 5%, okay? And then you have a seller here, okay? And now the seller wants not 5%, but 6%. So how does the buyer make money? Remember that here the buyer has bought the contract. So what he can do now, he can sell the same contract to somebody else. And, right? So what will happen? What will be the diagram now? Well, the diagram is going to be as follows. Here I am. I'm the buyer. And I'm going to pay 5%, right, to this guy, which is a seller. However, I'm also going to be a seller to somebody else. I'm a seller to this guy, which is also buyer too. But he pays to me, right, 6%. So if he, let's say, the notional is 10 million, here he will pay 500,000, right? But you are going to get in 600,000. So now, if the company defaults, say a company defaults, right? Then what will happen, this guy, this seller, is going to give a buyer $6 million. And then the buyer is going to give the seller, this buyer, right, the same $6 million. Sorry for the extra zeros. Right? Sorry about that. Okay, so what happened? Basically, the guy in the middle is immune against the default risk, right? For him now, it's basically a purely cash machine. He gives in 5%, right? But he gets 6%. So he's making 1%, right? On, he makes 1% on every time stuff goes in, right? So every year he's going to make $100,000 and $10 million. It's not such a bad deal. By essentially doing nothing, just collecting cash from this buyer and putting the cash into this seller, right? So this kind of mechanisms that I described is prevalent of how people think about these instruments, right, on the street, okay? So the biggest secret of them all, right, that you don't need to hold these instruments. You have a secondary market, right, where you can buy and trade those instruments between each other. Maybe it's not perfect, okay? Maybe you need to go into ISDA agreements and whatnot, but the underlying concept is this simple construction, okay? So that's the first part of the video, okay? And now I'm going to do a second part of the video where I'm going to explain, okay, how do we need to think about, how do we value those instruments, how can we think about those instruments in somewhat of a different terms, okay? Thank you very much. Okay, guys, so now, after we understand how people make money on credit default swaps, right, how do we think about them? How you can value them or how you can think about them? So I will not present the usual, machinery of how to do it through default probabilities. There is a very well-developed machinery where you can read about it in John Hall's book, if you really want, right? What I'm going to explain is how to think about this in a quick and dirty way, okay? And what I'm going to explain now is actually pretty typical because a lot of instruments, right, can be valued how I'm talking about them now, and you can think, and this quick and dirty way to think about them is actually very, very useful. It's useful for me. I hope it will be useful for you, okay? But this is something that, you can think about. When you go to an interview, I do warn you not to dwell about this too much, but just to mention it, and kind of show your interviewer that you kind of know what's going on, okay? So how can we think about credit default swaps, right? Usually, you using the usual construction of bonds and stocks and all that, right? So here what we are going to do, we are going to create a portfolio where we are going to buy a corporate bond, okay? Let's say on a notional of 10 million, right? Or principal of 10 million. And we are going to sell a treasury with the same maturity as this bond Okay. So let's see what happens in this case. Okay. So you are actually, what you are going to do, you are going to buy a corporate bond, you are going to sell a treasury. So if you have a portfolio, you buy right? A corporate minus a treasury. And you can be bothered, oh my God, how am I going to fund it? Let's leave those questions. Let's assume, right, that we have the same notional and the treasury, and the price of the treasury and the price of the bond, right, of the corporate, they are sold at par. Okay, so both of them sold at par with the same maturity. Now we know that in this case, right, the coupon for the corporate, okay, it's a bullet bond, right? It will be equal to and its price is equals to its notional, so it's 10 million, right? So it's 100, right? It will be equal to its yield. Now, yield corporate, right? Now, the coupon for the treasury, right, is going to be less than the coupon for the corporate. So if you have such a portfolio, you buy a corporate bond and then you sell a treasury, what you are getting in? You're getting in corporate coupon, and you're selling and you're minusing it, right, with a treasury coupon. So how do you read? How do you think about this? What is this difference? Well, this difference is exactly the spread. Right? We talked about spread, right? We said that in our shortcut world, right, the spread usually is going to be the difference between the corporate coupon and the treasury coupon, right? Or between the corporate yield and the treasury yield. But in this case, the corporate coupon, right, equals to its yield, and the treasury coupon equals to its yield. That's why, right, it's going to be a spread. Okay, great. So you are getting a spread back. Now what happens? What happens if, now the treasury cannot default, right? But what happens if the corporate defaults? Okay? So then what will happen with here, right? So the corporate defaults, say on 10 million, okay? Right? Basically you have a $10 million, right? The corporate defaults, you will not get your million back, you will get some recovery rate, let's say 4 million. Okay? But then you have the treasury, right? Which is actually the 10 million doesn't happen to him. So at maturity, you are going to lose $6 million. Okay? So what do we see here? This is actually very, very, very interesting, right? Because what happens here is as follows. Okay? You have a 4 million minus 10 million, you have 6 million. This is exactly identical to what would happen if you would just sell a CDS. Right? It's exactly identical to it, right? Because you are collecting this spread, whatever it is, let's say 5%. So you are getting in the coupon. But if you are going to default, right, you're actually going to, and we can think about this as 0.4, right? It's like the recovery rate. So you're going to be in a hole of 6 million, right? And this 6 million, okay, is exactly what you own to the buyer of the CDS. Hence, this is like a very interesting conclusion that you can reach, right? And it's kind of a dirty secret, right? That basically buying CDS, selling CDS, is like having a corporate bond. Okay? So you're having a corporate bond and you're selling or short the treasury. And if it's vice versa, you're a buying of a protection, right? So you're buying a treasury. And you are selling the corporate bond. Okay? So if you're a seller of a CDS, right, you basically own the bond, right? You own the corporate bond. If you're a buyer of a CDS, you actually short the corporate bond. You're betting against it, right? Now, having said that, say now my spread is going to move up by 100 basis points, right? How can you use this construction, right, in order to see what happens with your, with your credit default swaps? Okay, so now this is actually easy peasy, right? Because let's say that you are a seller of CDS and it moves against you, right? So say the spread duration, right? Your spread duration, right, is close to your duration. But the treasury is not going to incorporate, the treasury bucket, right, is not going to, to contribute anything, right? The treasury bucket will not contribute anything, okay, to your spread risk, right? Because it's the spread duration of treasury is 0, right? So all the spread duration, right, is going to come from this guy, from this part. So if you have, for example, if it goes up by 1%, right, and your spread duration here 4.5%, right, then if we are having an ideal situation where this, where both of them are actually sold at par, you know exactly what will happen, right? This will drop to minus 4.5%, right? So let's say it was 100, it was 10 million. Now it is going to be 900, whatever, 9,500,000, right? Something like that. If I didn't make a mistake, okay? And you're going to lose, right? 950. Now the treasury stays face, right? So you're going to be in a hole of minus $150,000, or 4.5 million. Sorry, that's it. Right? Because it's going to be whatever was before, right? Now it's 95 million. Now you subtract the 100 million from the treasury because the treasury did not change, right? The treasury here did not change because it's only the spread went up, right? So then you have basically 95 million, which is coming from here, right? And you subtract the 100 million, and you lose minus $450 million, minus $4.5 million, right? So that's what's happening when you have a portfolio of corporate bonds, right, of CDSs, and it goes up. You are actually going to, to lose money. Now, on the other hand, if the spread is tightening, it is going down. Okay? The same kind of calculation is going to actually tell you that you are going to be in plus 4.5 million, right? Because once again, what will happen here is that your corporate bond, right, had a 4.5%, but now it has a 4.5% gain because the spread went down, right? And then it's going to be 104.5 million minus 100, right, is 4.5 million, and you're done. Okay? So this is what happens if just the spread goes up. But what happens if interest rates goes up, right? This is going to become much more interesting because if interest rates go up, right, let's make a simplifying assumption, and in many cases it's almost correct, right, that this guy and this guy have close to the same duration, right? So if interest rates will go up, let's say the duration is still 4.5, right, on both sides. If interest goes up by 1%, right, what will happen, right? So basically both of these guys are going to lose money because the interest rates went up, so this guy losing, right? If they have close to the same durations, they will actually lose 4.5% on both, right? Because we know that initially they are actually traded on close to par, right? We said, okay, yield equals coupon, right, in this kind of portfolio. They will actually lose the same amount of money, right? So they basically will be, this portfolio will be neutral to interest rates, right? So what we get here is a typical construction, okay, where you are having, you buy one bond, you short the other bond, right? And then you kill the interest rate component, but you actually retain the spread component, right? So this is like a CDS. Something like this also happens with the floaters when we talked about it, right? So some construction like this, I described it for floaters, and this is a recurring theme in this business, right? You basically have a leverage instrument like a CDS. You can present it as usually like a portfolio of bullet bonds and whatnot, right? And what they're going to give you a way to value what happened with these leverage portfolios if things are going for and against you, but they're doing it in a quick and dirty way, right? This is not, this is not a kind of a precise construction. This is basically a construction which you can mentally think about this, and you get an answer which is 90% there, but it's not 100%, and there is no 100%. The truth is that there is no 100%, but people chase basis points, and that's fine. Okay, so that's what I wanted to tell you, and once again, great teaching you. Hopefully you benefit from these videos, and we'll continue in class to talk about those things. Thank you very much, and have a great day.